Before time began, there was the Cube.
The Nintendo Gamecube was a well-polished and deeply innovative system. Combine the rare and expensive component cables with a rare and expensive TV from the 2000s, and you have some of the best-looking and performing games of the entire console generation. The system is called the Gamecube, which describes it perfectly. It is a colorful cube that plays games. The controllers are also entirely unique and offer a wide selection of colors. This, coupled with the GameCube's first-party lineup, was and still is viewed as controversial or strange. This leads to the console not being very popular overall. Due to the culture surrounding games at the time, people cared more about graphics and adult themes than good game design or story. This console was perfect if you were going to introduce someone to gaming, though. In the 2000s particularly, there was a massive cultural backlash to video games as a form of media. And the reason I even bring this up is because today, the outlook on the GameCube is generally positive. I do miss the 2000s, but it was a time before information was readily available and easily accessible, which means a lot of people formed an opinion on something and never had the opportunity to re-examine it. If the GameCube came out today, it would most likely be a very different story. Depending on your preference, you may not agree, but objectively, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, in retrospect, is a well-made and, in my opinion, fun game. Though because of the style of graphics, it was disliked at the time, or seen as more childish. Nintendo released Twilight Princess near the end of the GameCube's life cycle, almost exclusively because of the failure of Wind Waker. Twilight Princess has a darker story, more realistic world, and impressive visuals. And Link also turns into a furry. Other strange choices which may have contributed to the failure of the system was it did in fact not release with a Mario title. It did have a game where an at the time unpopular character viewed as a simple color swap was the main lead fighting ghosts with a vacuum. Try to sell that to a long-term Nintendo fan. This game went on to influence Luigi's entire character and design in the modern day, but because it was different, it was overlooked. Metroid went 3D and first person. There was a game where you grow little flower aliens and command an army to build you a spaceship and kill people. Mario has a hover pack that speaks, and his main objective is essentially to clean up living paint and bring back the sun. Mario Kart now has 2 people riding in one cart, and that does affect the weight of the carts, and there's also a synergy mechanic. It's nothing like the rest of the franchise, and that sentence describes the entirety of the GameCube lineup. Bold choices, strange designs, and unpopular art style choices. To me, they were incredibly special. I was raised by alternative people, and as a result, I am also alternative. Alternative also pretty much just means different, and that is really what the GameCube was going for, if you ask me. Different, fun, and in some cases incredibly Japanese. But they also did manage to reach certain markets, and for whatever reason, I do feel like the GameCube in particular appeals more towards women as a demographic and alternative people. Even at the time, the advertisements for Nintendo were incredibly strange, Japanese, or targeted alternative people. There were multiple goth girls in multiple different events and commercials that promoted the GameCube. And on top of that, they took a lot of their Japanese design sensibilities and just advertisement writing, however you want to put that, and just pushed it onto the American market. The American market is, and probably always will be, incredibly close-minded, and when things are different, they are not well liked. But that does not change the fact that this time period in gaming was incredibly innovative and considered essentially some of the best shit to ever come out of any thing, just ever. I honestly think that coupled with the time period and the target audience, the GameCube was just incredibly unlucky. But it's really a diamond in the rough. And the gaming market surrounding the GameCube also kind of supports that statement. Everything, and I mean everything on this system, is expensive. I purchased the component cables, that way I could have the best possible graphics to play on. I also have a $2,000 to $3,000 Sony CRT HD Triniton, so I am getting the best possible graphics and performance out of the system. On top of that, for less expensive games, but still good games, you're looking at $80 to $120. And for better, more rare titles, $300 to $500. The GameCube also has some of the rarest and most expensive games in all of today's market for any system. You are able to play Game Boy Color, and advanced titles on your big screen, which is incredibly important. Anybody who's ever had a handheld, I'm sure at one point in your life you've thought, wow, I would love to play this on the TV. There's also a network adapter, which means you can play games online, and you still can to this day. The network adapter was underutilized, but it is active for some games. A great example of this would be the Phantasy Star Online community, which is absolutely thriving, even though it is a 20-year-old MMORPG. The design of this console is also immaculate. It's modular, and all of its attachments fit together incredibly nicely. On top of that, there's things that some other consoles to this day have still never done. You can press the button in the middle of the disc tray down to pop the disc up, which makes it so that you don't have to bend your discs to get them out or put any strain on them, which is really nice. There's also an incredibly rare variant of the GameCube from Japan, which can be modded to play English games. It's beautiful. It's chrome. It has a digital display on the outside, and it plays DVDs. So coupling the GameCube's component cables with its high performance and a nice TV, you're probably looking at one of the best ways to watch DVDs, period. But what makes the GameCube and subsequently the Game Boy Advance so important to me is the fact that it's so different and unique from anything else in all of gaming history. Everything surrounding it, its culture, its vibe, however you want to put that, it really is just one of my favorite systems. Not only do you have first-party Nintendo games, but you also have the best versions of multi-platform games. The GameCube kind of has the Xbox 360 to PS3 effect, where the PS3's architecture was hard to develop for, so it got worse games with worse graphics, even though they were the same games. The Xbox 360, while not really popular, thrived more during that console generation because the games looked better and played better. And that's what the GameCube is for this generation. It may not objectively be the most powerful. I believe the original Xbox has that beat out, but it was capable of producing the best graphics. Essentially, the difference between the GameCube and the Xbox would just kind of be like, oh, the Xbox can handle a little more, it can render a little bit more, but the GameCube still has it beat out in overall performance. So, I have paid over $5,000 for my GameCube collection, between controllers, peripherals, and games. I have about 60 titles currently out of the 350 or so North American titles, and a lot of those are already some of the most rare on the entire system. And I do have the most rare game, or one of the most rare games, Pokemon Box, which is incredibly elusive and sits at about $2,000 just for the game, and then another $2,000 for the big box. Other than that, though, for the GameCube and its titles, you're not looking at a lot of horror games like the PS2 is known for, or any real specific amount of certain games. Like, the original Xbox had a lot of first-person shooters. Like, the Nintendo GameCube does not have one set amount of games, but it does have a lot of games from a lot of different eras and titles and genres too, right? The Sega Dreamcast sadly failed, and that's one of my all-time favorite systems as well. And while we didn't get ports of games like Shenmue, we got stuff like Skies of Arcadia and Phantasy Star Online and Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. On top of that, Dragon Ball Z Budokai. GameCube version has the best graphics, best performance. Need for Speed Underground 2, same. If you have to choose between playing something on the PS2, Xbox, or GameCube, I would play on the GameCube. And everybody else would agree with that statement. And I'm not saying that as everyone else agrees with me. The prices for these games kind of prove it. Please pick the GameCube. It will drastically increase your enjoyability. Now, throughout this video, you may have seen footage of me playing the game, or you might have seen just a few of my favorite GameCube titles. This was just supposed to be a short little retrospective love letter to the GameCube, and one day I do plan going more in depth with it. As well, I will be making one for other systems. Most likely next will be the PS2, because that is also one of my favorites, and a lot of your favorite consoles as well. On top of that, I would like to thank my new editor for helping me out with this video. I have been struggling to make YouTube content on my own for a while, and I'm incredibly happy to try and come back in full swing. I hope that this video has better production value than the rest of mine, and that this is, so far to date, your favorite video that I've made. And thank you all so much for watching.